I may or may not have. I just want to get a few things on the table, and I'd like to discuss these elements with you because I think they're really important. Throughout the whole dialogue, there's a theme that's running. This theme of patricide, or of killing one's own father. In some sense, this is what Euthyphro is doing, right? Symbolically. What is he doing? Well, he's prosecuting his own father for murder. What would happen to his own father if he was convicted? He would die. Maybe in prison he would die. But he would definitely be imprisoned, right? He would no longer be the head of his household. He would no longer be running things. He would no longer be in control. He'd be unfree, in prison, not living a life any of us would want to live, right? There's something really interesting going on out there. And that is why what he's doing, Socrates asks him about it. Like, why do you think what you're doing is right? This would have been unheard of in Greek culture. To dethrone your father like that for killing a slave. That would have been fine. That would have been justifiable depending on what the slave did. They even allude to this, and this is heavily represented in Greek mythology. If you know anything about Greek mythology, the father of Zeus, who becomes basically the king of the gods, well, he's dethroned by his son Zeus. Why? Well, Zeus rises up against him because Cronus, his father, decides to start eating his children. And Zeus is like, what the hell? My daddy is eating my brothers and sisters. What's going on here? I got to kill this guy. And he does. He kills his father and he becomes the king of the gods. Instead, he commits patricide. Zeus. But in some sense, we must also recognize that this is what Plato himself is doing. Plato himself is symbolically engaging in patricide. How so? Well, what is he doing in this dialogue? Plato wrote this dialogue about what's right and wrong and where right and wrong comes from. Wouldn't you say he's destabilizing the Greek people's views on what's right and wrong? He's in some sense attacking their fundamental views on what's right and wrong. How do we know what's right and wrong, how we should behave, how we're supposed to act in our society? Well, in large part, it's due to the traditions we've been conditioned into. The stories, the rules, the norms that come from our tradition. Throughout his dialogues, Plato is challenging some of their key views about how the world works and how they ought to behave. Symbolically, I think we can say he's committing patricide against the Greek Homeric tradition. Because so much of how they think the world works and what's right and wrong and how they should behave is lifted from this ancient Greek poet named Homer, who wrote, anybody know? The Iliad and the Odyssey, and this was very important to them, okay? Their ethical system was based on these works. Their religious system was based on the stories of the gods in these works, okay, how they ought to behave. And Plato recognized the importance of tradition. He recognized its significance as a cultural vehicle of morals and social rules and behavior. But yet he's committing patricide against it in the sense that he's trying to kill off people's dependence on myth and poetry, and he's trying to replace it with reason and philosophy. How you think and behave shouldn't just be based on these mythical stories and poems. It should be based on reason and philosophy and argumentation and on what's rational. This is one of the reasons why Plato's mentor Socrates got in such hot water. He was acting in a way that they thought was rejecting and challenging their way of life and the contemporary power structure. See, this Homeric tradition, well, it had certain values and ideals. Rather than locating what's good and right in these fickle desires and wills of the gods who are always discordant with one another, and they disagree and they fight and they do weird stuff like Zeus coming down and raping a woman, Plato says, we should replace our moral system based on what the gods like and what the gods do with some unchanging objective standard. Based in reason and philosophy. Not based on whatever they're feeling that day. And he's taking a direct shot at the morality of the Homeric tradition because he doesn't agree completely with its values and ideals. Think of the Iliad and the Odyssey. What kind of behavior is praised in those works? Strength, military prowess, dying gloriously on the battlefield for one's country. Plato recognizes that those can be good things, but the way we live our lives shouldn't be our ultimate goal shouldn't be to die on the battlefield defending our city-state, perhaps. Maybe that's good in some sense, but no, there are more good things than that. Maybe there are more honorable, there are more moral things than that. Just trying to become strong, just trying to be good at handling weapons. Instead, what do Socrates and Plato push? Not leaning into becoming the biggest, baddest man you can be, but becoming the wisest and the virtuous person you can be. That's what should ultimately matter, Plato thinks. Not being the most manly, courageous man who's the biggest man and who can kill any other man with a spear, but becoming the wisest you can be. So this theme of patricide runs throughout the entire dialogue. And what we see Plato doing is he's contesting some fundamental views about how the Greeks should behave and where they get their standard of right and wrong from. So let me ask you, when are we justified in committing patricide? You can think about it literally. When would you be justified in literally killing your own father? Or you can think about it symbolically? When would we be justified in destabilizing those foundational views we've gotten from tradition? Which views should we destabilize? Which views from tradition should go? How do we maintain that delicate balance between recognizing the wisdom of what we've been given and what's worked with also meeting the needs of changing times? This is a question that the dialogue is asking of you. Because as you all know, there is a very intense culture war that is going on in Western society right now. And it's very heated, and people are very polarized, and everybody's debating, and they're resentful and angry at each other. So before just, picking a side, look at what they're saying. Think about what would be good. Think about what would be wise to do. This is something that Plato is trying to get us to consider. Okay? Now, he doesn't provide us with an answer to what piety is in this dialogue. But we get a clue as to an answer in the next dialogue that we're going to read, the Apology. Socrates' defense of his own actions in court. So read that carefully for Wednesday. Okay, so we have the theme of patricide. We also have some various other symbols that would be worth paying attention to. Okay? Think back to the cave. Think of the characters in the cave. Where does Euthyphro fit in there? You think he's one of the prisoners? He's not somebody who's escaped the cave and knows the truth? Why not?
Because he's set in his views. He's afraid of changing them or challenging them.
Ah, very good. Yes. Euthyphro should be a lesson to us. Why? Well, what is he doing? He claims to know what's right and wrong, so confidently that he's ruining his own father's life by prosecuting him and testifying against him. That's how sure of in his views he is. Are we not all very confident in our own views? I'm confident in my views of what's right and wrong, about how the country should work, about who the person to vote for should be. Everybody is. Everybody is confident in their views, right? In some views at least. We are like Euthyphro, secure in our beliefs, secure in our views about the world. But how often do we question them? It isn't until a person's views are challenged, unless they're a particularly, ambitious person, that they'll actually change what they think about things. What do most of us do? We just go through life as we always have, believing the things we've always had, until those views get challenged or we run into a problem, and those views aren't helping us solve it, right? Then we need to figure out how to modify them to deal with what's in front of us. Euthyphro is us. Who would Socrates then be? The escapee, right? Perhaps Socrates himself would claim, he hasn't escaped the cave. He would say, I don't know anything. I'm trying to figure it all out, and nobody's telling me because nobody knows what they're talking about, and I'm really trying to get to the bottom of things, and I don't really know anything. So I'm no better off than anybody else. But at least he can recognize that he lacks wisdom, right? That he's got a lot of growing to do, that he has a lot of learning to do. Socrates is who we might be. Who we might be if we utilize critical thinking, if we engage in reflection, if we practice open-mindedness. The very setting of the dialogue itself is also significant. This conversation doesn't take place in a random area of the city. It takes place right outside of the establishment where the religious law is laid down and where cases are heard and judged on. All of these elements have been carefully chosen by Plato because he's trying to, get us to reflect on these things. Again, when are we justified in killing our father, whether that father is our biological father or the tradition that we're a part of? How do we go about doing that if we find something in our tradition that is harmful and no longer serving us? These are all questions that, Plato is musing on and questions that we should ask ourselves. Sage, you had a question?
I was just thinking that Socrates is not specifically, but he's the one that helped the person escape because he's actually questioning Euthyphro and his beliefs, so he's helping.
You could say, if you want to attribute wisdom and knowledge to him, and he's doing the questioning, right? You might say he is the escapee who's come back in to help others, right? Because isn't that what he's doing with Euthyphro? He's trying to show Euthyphro, you don't really know what the hell you're talking about, right? You can't even explain your own view to me. You're getting all turned around. How lovely it would be for us, for our own educational development, if we had somebody like that in our lives who actually challenged us on our shit and prompted reflection. Yes?
I feel like we could be our own ways and challenge ourselves on our own in a way.
Yeah, how so?
Just knowing that you could be wrong on something you do, and just like what we talked about before, on thinking that you're wrong about things, so like kind of like prove yourself wrong in a way.
Yeah.
It's like thinking from a different perspective.
Yeah, you can reflect on your own views, right? Yeah, you can seek out alternative sources of information. You can ask people what they think, right? All too often, we treat conversations as if they are instruments for us achieving our desires. What would happen to you in your life if instead you viewed every conversation as an opportunity to learn and grow, not just to impose your own will or satisfy your desire? Yeah, it's a great point. Well, you've seen the two horns of the dilemma now, right? If you answer that well, good is independent of God, that would seem to imply God is not all-powerful, because God can only do good things. So there's something separate from and more powerful from God that he's beholden to, namely what's good. So there's a problem if you answer that way. Well, there's a problem if you answer the other way too. If you think that what is good just because God commands it, well, that might lead you to think, okay, so if God commanded tomorrow that we rape and murder, then it would be good? That doesn't seem right. So we have these two horns of the dilemma. How would you respond to it? How would you get out of this problem? What do you think?
I feel like we can't find a true answer to the problem of which one's good and which one's bad.
Okay.
But I feel like if we look at it from the point of view of each of like the ethical theories and just see like from this view what would we consider it as our own person good, and then base an answer off of that.
Okay.
Kind of like an educated guess in a way.
So you might say something like, yeah, the dilemma is a real issue. We can't ever really know the answer, so don't worry about it. We got these other tools or something we can use. Okay. How else might you respond to it? Yeah. By running away. Is that what we should do?
No, but I think it's like the both answers. They're too vague and they're too they're too large to give an exact reason.
Okay.
I would say like the best of both worlds would provide it as well.
What does that mean? Best of both worlds.
Well, like
You think both answers are like partly right or something?
I think they're partly right. Both of them.
Okay. Does anybody else think both answers might be partly right? Maybe? Well, in relation to that, here's a path you could choose. Somebody presents this dilemma to you as a good Christian or as a good Buddhist or as a good Hindu. What could you say? False dilemma, bro. You're presenting it as if there are only two options here. There aren't just two options. This raises something else you should know for this class, which is the fallacy known as false dichotomy. When someone presents you with something or something, and they pretend it's either this or this, well, if there are actually more options than just these two, they've given you a false dilemma, a false dichotomy. Because there are more options. There's a third way out, or a fourth way, perhaps. Yeah, a lot of theologians have thought this is a false dichotomy. There's actually a third way. Perhaps that kind of combines half and half of both. And what have they said, those who think it's a false dichotomy? Well, they've said it's both and neither. This one's true, half true, the other horn is half true. But you're thinking about the good all wrong. Good is something like what God wills according to his unchanging nature. It's not arbitrarily chosen. It flows from who God is. And ultimately, it's not what God commands that makes something good. It's the way God is. That's what makes something good. whether or not it aligns with God's nature. That's one way you could respond to this. That's one way a lot of Christians have responded to this. False dilemma, bro. You're thinking about what makes an action right or wrong, all wrong. What do you think of this response? Does it strike you as, yeah, that makes sense, that's intuitive? I mean, if you're a Christian, like ultimately, what do you think makes something good or bad? Is it just because God says it? You probably think something a little more deeper than that, right? Nevertheless, we're still faced with this question every day of how to behave. You know, what makes an action right or wrong? You might think it's the consequences of your actions. That's what makes them right or wrong. Does anybody believe something differently? You think, no, it's not the consequences, it's something else.
Is it loving?
Loving? Say more.
I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like what you're saying about that. Is it bringing happiness? Because if it's not loving, then it's not, I guess in my view, it's not good. It's causing more harm than good.
Okay.
I try to at least, like, when I choose what actions I'm doing, am I saying something that's loving? Because then I think, is it going to hurt that person? Or is it going to help them, I guess?
Like help them improve their well-being or something? So let me ask you this. Let's go back to the example I brought up. You plan a surprise party for your new friend Greg. He comes into the apartment, and you all shout surprise, and you hold the cake out, and the dude just flips. He has a panic attack, anxiety, trouble breathing. You got to rush him to the hospital. Did you do a bad thing? Why not? Yeah, why didn't you do a bad thing?
Oh, because you didn't have an intention. Like, your actions were good. His actions weren't a good response.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately, you know, that consequence came about. But what was that I word you just used? Intention. Maybe that's what you think ultimately makes an action right or wrong, is whether or not you have the proper intention. Does anybody believe this? If you have the right intention or the right heart posture, then even if your consequences, hurt people, you didn't do a bad thing. Your heart was in the right place. Yeah?
In that situation, I feel like it's kind of weird because if you know you're that friend for a long time, or you just don't.
Greg is a new friend.
New friend.
Yeah, so you didn't know he'd have a panic
So
attack.
you didn't know that he could have been an anxious person. Okay. Because if you did know that friend for a long time, then you actually didn't really know that friend.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I understand that for that. But I feel like if you did know that friend for a long time, then you should know that friend better.
You'd hope so, right? Yeah, does anybody here like this intention view? Why? Why does this seem right to you?
Because you meant no harm to the other person, or to whatever your actions were.
You meant no harm. Even if something bad happens, still your heart was in the right place, you'd say?
You feel bad, and you would want to apologize if the brag.
Sure.
You want to help them out, but that necessarily doesn't make it a bad thing because you were trying to be a good friend and throw them a birthday party.
You were trying to be a good friend, right? It went south, but you didn't want or intend that to happen, right? No, you intended Greg's happiness. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we have two views on the table. It's the consequences that make an action good or bad, or it's our intention before we act. You think there are any other views? Can you think of any others?
Like pleasure.
Pleasure? Yeah, we'll just put it as its own view. Kind of like a hedonism. You might categorize this under a kind. It's like a subtype of utilitarianism, but yeah. It's determined by whether or not your actions produce pleasure or they reduce suffering. Or reducing pain, I should say.
But sometimes people get the pleasure of money.
Say more. Would it be a moral action for me to just walk into the classroom every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and shoot up heroin? It brings me a lot of pleasure. Yay or nay? Should I take the heroin's path? You wouldn't? Why not?
It's not harming you per se.
Yeah, it's not going to be harming you. I'm probably going to be really animate. No, I'll probably be on the ground, but
It's not harming me physically or emotionally. It's more affecting you as a person, so why should I pay it?
yeah. Maybe you want to get an education, so you're like, Professor Gunner, quit falling asleep in class because your heroin use, like.
If you thought it would make you teach better and it would be the best interest for us to listen to you on heroin, it would be good.
Then it would be good, you think?
Yeah.
Anybody think it would be bad? Why?
The use of heroin?
Yeah. It's bringing me pleasure.
Sure, but I don't know if
It's not causing you any
I
pain.
don't know if it's the right place for it.
Not the right
It's a
environment.
bad example for us.
Sets a bad example, okay. Yeah, maybe in a roundabout way, getting addicted to that stuff would make my life overall painful and not great, and I'd lose my job, and my parents would be disappointed, and y'all wouldn't have a professor for critical thinking. Well, maybe it would, yeah, okay. Maybe. We'll see. Jury's still out on whether or not I'll bring that in. No.
But I was thinking more of the lines of serial killers.
Okay.
A lot of them don't have that ability to understand the human emotion of pain. And so they find pleasure in these activities. But society says that what they did was wrong, but in their head it's not. It's
Sure.
It's the chemistry in their brain that just makes them think this is correct, but it's not socially.
Like if they're incapable of empathy,
Yes.
say.
It's bringing them pleasure, but it's not a good thing for society.
Right. So maybe you would contest, this view by saying, well, it shouldn't be about pleasure and pain. It should be about, well-being, improving the well-being of society. That's a little different than pleasure, right? Because you all know doing the good and healthy thing often brings pain. Like not watching the 10th episode of Love Island after 9, or going to the gym when you really don't want to because that's going to help your sleep and it's going to help your health. Or eating your vegetables even though you really want to eat that whole tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Right? Does anybody think maybe what makes an action right or wrong is based on something else, not any of these?
Cultural construct.
Cultural construct?
Yeah, which is tied to thinking relativism.
Yeah, let's call it moral relativism.
And tied to the first topic that we have, its consequences will depend on the culture and acts
Yeah, this is a view that a lot of people hold, right? There's no objective standard of right and wrong that we're all beholden to. Really, what's right and wrong is just, it's based on the social and cultural context. So in our country, burping and farting a lot at the fine dining restaurant is not good, whereas in other places it's ill-mannered not to burp when you're eating a meal they cooked you. Something like that? Yeah.
I feel like that can go more into just like even the larger rules of society itself that like we kind of force in a way.
Okay.
And don't question as much. It's like we can base the answers just based on the overall rules of society.
So like kind of what Euthyphro said. Like, well, what's pious, Socrates, is what all the gods love. So maybe you could say, well, what makes an action right or wrong on this planet is, generally, do all the countries and societies agree or not?
But they never do.
Say more. You don't think they agree on some general things?
No.
Is there any country that thinks murder is good?
You could argue yes. Because their government's committing it.
Well, yeah, there's always that, but you look at the people of the country and you ask them, hey, does your country believe that murder is good? Like, everybody's going to say no, right? Even if people are doing it. Maybe you think that, yeah, we disagree about the finer details, but we all have the same values, maybe? Maybe we all value honesty. Maybe we all value pleasure. Maybe we all value health.
I also think that you can't say that a country values murder. Maybe the government of that country has in mind. But
Sure.
people should speak more than just the government itself. So it's different than just saying that this country values murder when it's just a small portion of the country that you're speaking for.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. Because there are a lot of governments that do a lot of bad things, right? And there are a lot of things that the people don't agree with their government on, right? In all kinds of places. Yeah, Sage.
What about countries that think murder is good if someone did something bad?
Well, what do y'all think about that? You have a serial murder rapist. Do you put him to death? Is that the right thing to do?
No, but when you get beaten up in jail, okay, so
We do pay for them in jail too, like our taxes.
Okay.
So like you're paying for him to stay alive, basically.
So is that good or bad?
I'm not saying, but like if you're saying, well, he'll get what he deserves in jail. Some people are not okay with their money keeping him alive. Some people are.
Sure. Sure.
Some people don't think it's our decision. I'm just saying. I'm just adding that.
Some people think, it would be always wrong to take a life, even for such a person as this. Some people would say, no, the right thing to do in order to, prevent more murders and rapes is to kill him. Some people would say it's actually our duty to kill him. We have a duty to him to kill him because he's no longer a rational creature and he's a monster, and what's good for him is that we put him out of his misery. These are all views that have been forwarded by people, right? Whether or not you think capital punishment is going to be moral or immoral or not is going to be generally based on, what you think makes an action moral or immoral. What kind of a standard are you working with? Do you just think it's relative to whatever our society accepts and conditions? If that's the case, then, we wouldn't be able to criticize countries for engaging in female genital mutilation, right? Because it's good for them. On the other hand, if you think, it's all about pleasure, it seems obvious that no, pleasure is not always good. In fact, doing the displeasurable thing is often what's good for us, like going to bed early, like eating a good diet, like going to the gym. On the other hand, maybe you think, it's all about the intention. If your intention's in the right place, you did a good thing. Say that again when somebody has a good intention and their action results in your mother's death. Right? And then finally you might say, okay, well, no, it's all about the consequences. If it's making the world a better place. Oh, okay, so you think it's justifiable to, say, murder 1 million people if it will solve world hunger forever? All of these theories have their own issues, right? None of them are perfect. Of course, the one we've been looking at so far in this dialogue is divine command theory. It's a version of that. It's determined by what God commands and or is. That's a view you could have. Or you could go with a much newer view. You might think, like many feminist philosophers of the 20th century, that what makes everything possible in our society is relationships. You wouldn't be alive unless your parents related to you in a positive way when you were a kid. You would have been dead already. You wouldn't have any electricity if it were not for the relationships this institution has to electricians. We wouldn't have any paved roads without having relationships between the people who pave the roads and do the construction. We wouldn't have running water and all of that without having relationships with plumbers. So they think what's moral or immoral is determined by whether we're strengthening or maintaining our relationships and meeting the needs of those we're responsible for. That's another view you could hold. Or perhaps you might be someone who thinks all this talk is stupid. You know how the world really works? It's just law of the jungle. It's all about power. It's all about looking out for number one. The world isn't a fair and nice place. No, how the world works is that the strong and those who have power do what they want, and the weak are trampled over. So, all this talk about what's good and nice and moral, that's just holding you back from recognizing the harsh reality. So, you just got to look out for number one. Screw everybody else. They don't matter. And there are certainly people who hold this view. So which one's right? What do y'all think? Emma?
You can't say any of them are right because it's up to the person to decide that for themselves.
So kind of something like this? Little...
In a way, because everyone's like actions is rooted in emotion. So I think it's more determined by intention.
Okay, so you like the deontological view maybe?
Yeah, but if a person has a different view, like it's open to discussion.
There are certainly people with a lot of different views, yeah. What would you put your bet on? What do you think makes an action right or wrong?
I feel like they're more useful when you put them all together.
When you put them all together. Well, they're giving conflicting answers to this question. Maybe you could take bits and pieces of them, maybe?
It's like, does this view work? Does this view work? Because like, if you base all your logic onto one view, and it's like yeah, that view it would be what I did was right, but then every other view can prove that as what you did was wrong. You can't really base off that one view.
Okay. Yeah, what do you think?
I know there's obviously, like, how you were saying earlier, like there's people out there that don't have empathy or anything, but like I think a big part of it is just intuition. Like humans do have like a natural instinct to like choose between two things.
Mm.
Like the outcome of either one. Like, and it's kind of you could have a selfish one or not.
We certainly do have intuitions about what's right and wrong, right? I give you a wild case. I've been doing that all day. And immediately, you have a flash of insight about whether it's right or wrong, right? Yeah, we all have these intuitions. The question is, well, should you rely just on those? Has your intuition always been right? Or have your intuitions often been wrong? Euthyphro certainly has intuitions about what's right and wrong. And when pressed, he can't even explain his own view. Perhaps we all fall into that same boat, right? And we need to do some more thinking about this. In any case, I wasn't intending to go over all that, but it's interesting for you to know. It might be helpful for you in the future, because constantly you will be faced with, well, dilemmas about how to act, about what the right thing to do is, right? Do I lie to my grandmother in the hospital who is dying? Do I tell her I am engaged to someone so she'll think I'll get married and she'll die happy? Or do I tell her the truth? What's the right thing to do? It's the right thing to do, tell my father a little white lie, or do I tell him the hard truth that's uncomfortable? You're going to be faced with decisions like this again and again in your lives. And if you don't have some sort of way of, thinking through these things, you're probably not going to fare so well, right? So think about this stuff. Reflect on your own beliefs. Ask others what they think. Okay. Any final questions, concerns, considerations? Otherwise, I'll let you go a little bit early here. Okay. Thank you very much. Read the apology for Wednesday. And don't forget, you might have a quiz any day that we have class.